This is Orlando Sentinel Now.
Hello and welcome. It's Thursday, October 14th, and this is Orlando Sentinel Now. Today, we're talking about where you can get your fossilized dinosaur poop insured in the state of Florida. Also, we have a Florida Fresh Air feature for you, and we're talking about what's going on in high school football. I'm your host, Joe Mario Pedersen, and joining me today, I have business and insurance reporter Trevor Frazier, Things to Do reporter Patrick Connolly, and high school sports reporter JC Carnahan. Thank you all so much for being here today. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. Trevor, coming to you first, but first I want to pose a question here of what do fossilized dinosaur poop, a butler, and drones all have in common? According to you, they can all be insured in the state of Florida.
Yeah, they can all be insured through what are known as the surplus lines. And this is really what my story was about. Some people may have encountered what are known as the surplus lines of insurance, the surplus line services. If they have, for example, a flat roof, or if they have a house that, just for whatever reason, other insurers don't want to handle. Maybe it's in a bad location and so on and so forth. Sometimes you have to go outside what's called the admitted market, which is the regular, if you just want to insure your car, you call State Farm and say, how much to insure my car, or, whatever. But if you want to insure things that, other insurers don't want to take on, you have to go to what's called the surplus lines. And the surplus lines basically means it's insurance that doesn't have to conform to all the same regulations that the other insurance conforms to. So it's a little riskier for the buyer, but at the same time, it allows these companies to take on, potential losses that other companies wouldn't do. So going to something like, for example, in Florida, in Jacksonville, there's a man who has the largest collection of coprolite in the world. Coprolite is fossilized dinosaur poop. He has over 7,000 pieces. And in fact, a lot of that is currently on display at the Orlando Science Center, is what's called the Pooseum. But to get it into museums, he had to get it insured. And he said that when he first went to insurance companies and asked them to, value, he has the largest poop ever made by a carnivore. It's from a T-Rex. And he asked them to value this and to insure it. He said he got laughed out of the room. He'd just call up and say, hey, I have this very valuable poop. Will you please do this? And they'd start laughing, and he'd never get a quote. And he had to go into these surplus lines, and he had to, get it valued this other way. But yeah, it can cover a lot of things. It can cover, drone usage and so on. Obviously, drones are kind of a big thing right now that a lot of people are using. And then, anything from professional services to one of my personal favorites is for contests. You can get things insured.
This is a really interesting feature that you picked up on here. And one question that I do want to ask in regard to those insurance companies specializing in surplus lines, what kind of policies do they have for objects like these?
It's very similar to to any other kind of insurance that you would get. It's based on the value of the thing, and it's based on the kind of damage that could happen to it. It's also based on whether or not there could be public damage. So, for example, one thing that is usually handled by surplus lines is cell phone towers. Cell towers are usually insured through the surplus lines, and that's because cell towers are giant things that have the capability to come down and do a lot of damage and so on. And a lot of insurers don't want to handle something like that. So, you get the same sort of liability insurance that you would get on your house or your car, but for these more, strange objects. One of the ones that the guy, I spoke to a guy from who works with surplus lines, and he said that one of the ones that's commonly insured through them is amphibious cars. There are, tour groups and so on that have these amphibious cars that can drive into the water and then drive right out onto the land. Well, those are a little riskier than just like a boat, and if you're going to have people in it and, there's the potential for, it to capsize or for it to break. It's the same sort of damage and liability policy. But again, then you have the extra things like what's known as, I mentioned the contests. It's called a hole-in-one policy or a prize indemnification policy. And that's for if you have For example, if you have a contest that, anyone who gets a hole in one in this golf course gets $10,000. Well, they've got to look into and figure out how easy it is to get a hole in one at that golf course. You have these people who will go and they'll evaluate whether or not, the likelihood that someone's ever going to hit that hole in one. And the thing that he told me was, you're only going to take that risk, you're only going to write that policy if you don't think it's ever going to happen, if you don't think that anyone's ever going to actually hit that hole in one. And it does happen. There was a bass fishing contest that offered $100,000 prize to anyone who got a bass over, I think it was 100 pounds. And for 7 years, no one caught any bass over 100 pounds. And then one day in a Central Florida lake, sure enough, some guy pulled out a 101-pound bass, and they had to pony up $100,000 for that. So, yeah.
Really, really fascinating feature. I highly encourage everyone to go take a look at it. You can catch Trevor's work at orlandosentinel.com. Trevor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Patrick, I want to head on over to you now. It's time for a Florida Fresh Air feature. And this week, we're heading east of Orlando. We're heading over to Chuluota Wilderness Area. Can you tell us more about it?
Sure. For those of you who aren't familiar, Chuluota is kind of a little town, a bit, to the north, well, kind of east of Oviedo, a bit north of Christmas. And so the Chuluota Wilderness Area, it's a 625-acre plot of natural land owned by Seminole County, kind of right on the Orange County border. And it's just really nice. There's hiking trails. There's equestrian access as well, so horseback riding is an option. You could take your bike on the trails as well. And also part of the Florida Trail, it's the, about 1,500-mile route that runs the length of the state, runs through the Chuluota Wilderness Area. So you actually have a couple different options. You could take the East Loop, which I made the mistake of doing. And it was a mistake because it was very wet right now. I would say in the next couple months it should be drier, but my feet were soaked after doing that. I also did get to hike a little bit of the Florida Trail, which is very nice and scenic through there. And I believe I was the first hiker of the day because I did accidentally took on a practice known as silk blazing. I walked through all of the spider webs. So if you ever go out there, you should hope to be the third or fourth hiker because, otherwise you might be running into some webs. Then there's the West Loop as well, just over 2 miles. It kind of traverses this sand pine scrub. It's a little bit drier, maybe a little more sunny as well, but with some patches of shade.
Well, there you go. Be on the lookout for those spider webs. If you're looking for more information on that, be on the lookout for Patrick's Florida Fresh Air features coming out every Friday. Patrick, thank you so much. All right, JC, I want to come over to you now for some news going on in high school football here in Central Florida. Before we get into the top games here in Week 8, we've got some news going on with a West Orange wide receiver, Jaden Gibson, who's committed to the University of Florida. What have we heard?
Yeah, on Wednesday, he was part of a special ceremony at the high school's gymnasium where he whittled his top 8 choices down to 3. And lo and behold, yes, it is the Florida Gators that Jaden Gibson is going to be playing for. And it really got me thinking as we look ahead to December, which is the early signing period for high school football players. And it's a key time for kids around this area. We've got a number of players that are already committed to the University of Florida and several that are committed to locally here to play for UCF. So a lot of big-time schools are going to be, getting pledges from Orlando area football players here in just a couple months.
More news on that certainly coming soon. But focusing on the here and now, we're in Week 8 in football here in Central Florida. So what are the top games that you're looking forward to this week, JC?
I'm going to give you 3 that really stand out to me for a Friday night. First, I want to mention Dr. Phillips plays at Osceola High School in Kissimmee. Before this game gets kicked off, Osceola is going to rename its football stadium. It's going to be called Marcus Paul Stadium, and that's in honor of a former football and basketball standout from the 1980s at Osceola High School. He had a great college career at Syracuse, spent about 5 years playing in the NFL, and then was a longtime strength and conditioning coordinator for the past 2 decades. He died unexpectedly last November while working for the Dallas Cowboys, and he will be honored, of course, on Friday night there at Osceola High School. He was always involved in the program all these decades later, so that's one thing to keep an eye out for there. The game I'll be covering, I will be in Oviedo to see Seminole play against the Lions, and this is a game where Seminole quarterback Luke Rucker is kind of a homecoming for him because he played at Oviedo just last year. So with the way that the open transfer rules are now in the state of Florida, this kind of makes things a little bit easier for kids to kind of pick and choose where they feel the best fit is for them. So that's going to be a pretty intriguing matchup right there. And then the third game I want to throw out there, it's going to be happening in downtown Orlando. Jones High School is hosting Daytona Beach Mainland. This is a big district game because Mainland has already defeated Lake Mineola, who finished state runners-up last year in Class 6A. Well, and so this is a big game in terms of who can pave the path for a first-round home field advantage in the playoffs and to get a top seed in the postseason as well. So those are the 3 games on my radar. You can check out all the coverage at sentinelvarsity.com.
There you go. If you can't see those games, be on the lookout for JC's coverage of it this weekend. JC, thanks a lot. All right, before we all leave you today, we do want to talk about Thursday's weather presented by Premier Sotheby's International Realty. Thursday's weather is more of the same as days earlier this week, with light rain forecast at 10% during the afternoon and into the evening. Temperatures are forecast for a high of 87 and a low of 73. Friday breaks from the norm with a mostly clear day. That forecast repeats for the weekend, which should experience a cold front as the combination of dry air and a frontal system drops temperature lows into the 60s Sunday leading into next week. Very cool stuff there. And if you want to find out more, of course, you can by visiting OrlandoSentinel.com, where you can get caught up on all the news and events going in and around Central Florida. For those of you who are subscribed to the Orlando Sentinel, thank you so much for continuing to support our work and supporting local journalism. If you want to support this kind of work, it's easy to do so. All you need to do is visit OrlandoSentinel.com/subscribe. We appreciate all that help and support. As for OSN, though, that will do it for us today. A big thank you to Trevor, Patrick, and JC for keeping us filled in what's going on in our community. We'll be back again with more news tomorrow at noon. We'll see you then. Stay healthy and stay safe.
Watch Orlando Sentinel Now live every weekday at noon on our Facebook page and on OrlandoSentinel.com.